We are here at the 30th annual Marin show, American Indian Art Show, and we have a special exhibit of textiles from the Totalina Two Gray Hills region. And we entitled the show The Decades, and so the pieces are set up in 10-year increments to show the development of the weaving tradition over the last 100 years. And the exhibit starts with a piece here that we call a catalog rug, and this was something that was made for various traders, produced catalogs in the early 1900s to market Navajo rugs. And so you could order a rug like this in a variety of colors and shapes and sizes, mostly bought and sold by the pound. And so rugs were basically regional style things, and so there was different looks to different rugs that were made in different areas of the reservation. And the weavers in this region really preferred the use of just natural colors of wool. And this rug was made about 1912 to 1913, and it is really the earliest Two Gray Hills rug, and it's shown here in a photograph of the Shiprock Fair in 1913, has a photo of this actual rug in it. As we move along, we'll start seeing the design development. And this is a very typical with the multiple borders and just the natural shades of wool. Now we have the next section of the exhibit, which is the 1915 to 1920 period. And we have a couple of beautiful Two Gray Hills rugs with the design starting to become more developed here. A little use of more natural colors of wool, the various shades of tans and browns. This rug is made by one of our early day weavers who was called Blind Man's Wife. And her husband, Blind Man, wasn't actually blind, but he had lost one eye, and he was a medicine man, and so it was very unusual to have a one-eyed medicine man. And so she was, in typically Navajo fashion, was known as Blind Man's Wife in a reference to her husband. So this rug dates to about 1915 to 1920, and it's an elaboration of the earlier catalog design rugs. And we call it a quarter diamond storm pattern. Now this is another catalog rug done about 1915 to 1920, done by another one of our early day weavers named Mrs. Police Boy. And Mrs. Police Boy was born at Bosque Redondo in 1865 and made this rug when she was probably about 40 or 45 years old. She lived to be 100. She passed away in 1965. So she had a really good long weaving career. And this is what's called the storm pattern. And so you have the center of the storm. You have lightning bolts that go out to the four sacred mountains in the four corners, which are all signified by the swastika design. And so you see a lot of the floating elements start to come in to these rugs of this period. The next one we have here is made by Mrs. Police Boy's daughter, Marin Curley. And Marin was born in 1877 when her mother was only 12 years old. And she also lived to be 100. She passed away in 1977. And she was probably one of the earliest, greatest designers of these rugs. So she took her mother's designs to a whole new level. We start to see these Anasazi designs, and the traders would show them Anasazi pottery and get them to emulate the design. So you see the spiraling, triangles, spiraling squares. You see the use of this T with the floating Anasazi footprints, we call these. And so this rug design is called a three-column. And so she was really one of the greatest designers that really took this to a whole new level. Here we're in the decade of the 1930s, and this was really a great time for Two Gray Hills weavers. They really had come into their own. The weavers were paid, by the piece rather than by the pound, and we saw this exceptionally fine spinning start to happen. This is made by a weaver by the name of Yellow Mustache's Wife, which is again a reference to her husband, which is very typical amongst Navajos for them to reference the weavers that way. And she was what's called Sleepy Rock clan. She was a relative of several of our other weavers that we have there. But we see a beautifully laid out and designed storm pattern rug. Remember the big center of the storm, lightning bolts, four sacred mountains, and then you see multiple borders here. A beautiful use of golden tan wool. Just gorgeous use, and this wool is really distinctive to our area. It doesn't exist in other areas of the reservation. We have very special sheep there. This is an early piece by Daisy Togglechi, about 1935 or 1940, and we see Daisy as a young weaver starting to really, set her standard that she later went on to become really literally the best living Navajo weaver. So we see very crisp designs. It is again a storm pattern with the center of the storm, the lightning bolts and the four sacred mountains. You see the use of spiraling triangles, Anasazi designs, these Anasazi footprints. And people have asked about this, but what we see in the upper corners of these rugs are what's called spirit trails. And the weavers put their heart, their soul, they put everything into their rugs, and they don't want to leave it there. So they have these spirit trails that go out, and that is a continuation from rug to rug to rug. We ask some of the weavers why they do it, and they tell us because their mother told them to do it. So that's as good an answer as anything for a Navajo weaver. Now the last rug we see here in the 1930s section is made by Helena Hostine Tagalchi Nez Begay. So her name is quite a mouthful. But she was Daisy Tagalchi's older sister-in-law, very influential in Daisy's early work. And we see along with the rug, which is really a stylized star center storm pattern, we see photographs of Helena with the rug. Here's a picture of her and Hostine Nez, her husband, with the rug, her husband on a horse. And here's her daughter, Rose Curley, standing in front of the rug. And here's a picture taken 70 years later of Rose standing in front of the same rug again. And when we showed it, Rose is a very traditional weaver, but when we showed her the rug, she laughed and said in Navajo to her daughters that she got older, but the rug didn't. Rose went on to become one of our master weavers also, besides her mother's work. So it's really fun to have this kind of great documentation for one of our rugs, to actually see early photographs of them. Very rare. Well, now we have the decade of the 1940s, and the two Gray Hills rugs have become increasingly more sophisticated and better and better designs. This is a single diamond layout made by one of our early master weavers, Maddie Nakaisosi. And so you see her single diamond design in the use of these sort of abstract elements in the center, beautiful combed gray field, and then the use of this tan brown wool, which is really distinctive to our rugs. The rug next to it here was made by a weaver by the name of Yazi Blackhorse. And Yazi comes from the Mud Clan family of Clara Sherman, her sister, who was a more famous weaver, but she was a really good weaver in her own right. And we have a photograph of the whole family holding this rug, taken in about 1940 here. So that gives us real positive information on the weaver and the family. Incidentally, Yazi Blackhorse granddaughters run our trading post today. So they're very thrilled to see an early rug by their grandmother. Now over to the right here of our 1940 section, we have a beautiful 3-column rug by another one of our master weavers, Elizabeth Billy. And this is a really tremendously designed rug. It's really beautiful. And she did what we call 3-column, which has the 3 columns of design, which was made popular by Mary Yanaba a decade or so earlier than this. And Elizabeth is still with us. She's very elderly. She's about 90 now. And when I first got this rug, I took it to Elizabeth to see it, and she cried when she saw it. She hadn't seen it since the 40s. And when I interviewed her, I asked her which was her favorite rug she ever made in her life, and she said this one, because it was the one that came back to visit her. We're still in the decade of the 1940s now, and this is a rug done by one of our most famous master weavers, Bessie Minigoats, and it's a 3-column designed rug, and this one's extremely finely made and it's almost 80 wefts to the inch, so very fine, and just beautiful wool colors and very abstract designs. That Bessie was very creative, and each one of her rugs had completely different designs. And this is made by Bessie's first cousin, or what the Navajos would call cousin sister. This is Rose Curley, and this rug was done probably about 1945 to 1950. And again, beautifully fine, nice tan background field here, and you see several different shades of the tan wool she's used. She has a little bit of gray here, but she's mostly focused in on her tan brown wools. So now we're in the decade of the 1950s. We see the spinning and the weaving becoming increasingly finer and very much more sophistication in the designs. Here we have another one of the storm patterns with the center of the storm and the lightning bolts going to the four sacred mountains in each of the corners. This one's made by Minnie Wilson George, who's what we call Cinnabilney or Sleepy Rock people, and one of our really good early day weaving families at Totalina there. This here rug is a tapestry grade rug, which means it's spun so fine that it's at least 80 weft threads per inch. And this is woven by Daisy Togglechi, who was our most famous weaver's sister, younger sister, Mildred Natani. And it very much emulates the work of her sister. And so this dates again to the early 1950s, and it was collected by the traders at the trading post we now have, and it stayed in their family. And so this rug, this is the furthest this rug's ever been from home. It made it from the trading post to 50 miles to Farmington, and then it made it back to the trading post. So this is its first adventure out around the world. Here's a real interesting design rug by another one of our master weavers, Esther Silent Man. And Esther was a very colorful character, and she sort of specialized in the use of these curvilinear type designs, and we'll show some of her daughter's work in a little later. But Esther, I found rugs by Esther under 5 different last names, and so I teasingly call her Esther Mini Names, or Esther Gets Around. But she was married several times, and so we see beautiful things by her. Now off to the side is a rug by probably one of our 2 most famous master weavers. This is Bessie Minigoats, and Bessie was really just a tour de force. She was crippled. She mostly lived in a wheelchair and traveled around with a walker. And in the area where the weavers, nobody really knew how good a weaver she was. They never really saw her rugs locally. She mostly took them to the trading post and they were sold. This rug was first prize at the Gallup Ceremonials in 1957, and it won top prizes at the Shiprock Fair in 1959. And it's really beautifully fine. It's almost 80 wefts to the inch, and she was just really one of the most incredible designers. Her lines are so straight, her designing is so crisp and beautiful, and she sort of specialized in this idea of using dark backgrounds in the rugs that she did. All right, well here we have a couple pieces that represent the decade of the 1960s. And this is a rug by Ramona Curley. And again, it's one of these 3-column designs that, that are fairly rare. I happen to like them, so my collection contains sort of an inordinate amount of those because I love the designs. But you see, she's used all the Anasazi footprints and a lot of really intricate, designs that were taken from the Anasazi pottery. And it's a beautiful brown feel. She has several shades of gray in it. And the rug may contain, up to 8 colors, which is surprising. They appear so monochromatic, but we see quite a few different colors in it. And this is woven by Francis Manuelito, again, one of our really great weavers. We looked at a rug earlier in the exhibition by Blind Man's Wife, and Francis was Blind Man's Wife's daughter. And in this family, we have 4 generations of master weavers. It's the only family that we know of all 4 generations that were master weavers. And so this is, as we looked back at the first rug, you see the repeating hook designs and things of her mother's earlier rug. And again, really nice shades, very subtle shading in the wool, very finely woven, very crisp, very clear design. Really a really good example of the kind of work that was done in the 1960s. Now this is one other rug from the 1960s period, and this is woven by Helen Minigoats. And Helen was a sister-in-law of Bessie Minigoats. She was married to Bessie's brother. And so that's where the name similarities come in. Again, this is a 3-column design, and you see very subtle coloration between the different tans and brown used in this. And she's one of our favorite designers, and Helen made us probably about 20 or so rugs in the last 15 years or so. She just passed away this last fall. So we got to show her some of these old rugs and have her help us identify them when we could find an old rug. Now this represents the decade of the 70s and goes a little over into the 80s here. But this was an area we had really a lot of tapestry weavers working. This is Dorothy Mike. This is about 100 weft tapestry, exceedingly fine. So A smaller rug this side took more work and time than a bigger rug this side because of the spinning of the wool. Once they spun that wool incredibly fine, they literally have cursed themselves to having to weave a rug that fine. So literally the weaver has to go back and forth 100 times to move 1 inch up the surface of the rug. And so this rug in the center here is made by Ruth Teller. Ruth was one of 3 sisters that were all really great master weavers here. One of her sisters, Mary Louise Gould's rug, is seen to the side of it here, and there's an early picture of Mary Louise with her dad in the wagon. She's finished the rug. Her dad has hooked up the wagon, hooked up the team of horses, and they're headed to the trading post as soon as they get a picture of it to sell the rug. The 2 rugs on the bottom here are made by Ruth Teller's daughter, Roseanne Lee, and Barbara O'Nalis. And Barbara's one of the most famous living Navajo weavers now. She's very self-promoting and does a really great job. She enters Indian Market. She's won top awards at Indian Market several times. And so it's a great weaving family. So these are 2 of the daughters of Ruth. That's why I put these together to see kind of our generational change. Ruth's comes from the 70s, but Roseanne and Barbara's are probably more from the 80s here. And like I said, here's Mary Louise Gould, who's her sister, and there was a 3rd sister, Margaret Yazzie. Their mother, Susie Tom, is also one of her master weavers, but we don't have one of their rugs in the exhibit here today. Now these 2 rugs, or I should say tapestries, because they're exceedingly fine pieces, are really at the beginning of our decade of the 1980s. And these are the 2 weavers. They aren't related to each other, but what they do have in common is they use this beautiful light pinkish shade of wool in their rugs. And how they obtained that is they literally took white wool and they combed just a little tiny bit of the brown wool in it. And it gave it this almost pinkish quality. This is Elizabeth Mute, and done about 1985, and this is Daisy Lapahi. And so they're just really beautifully, very structured, very fine tapestries, really very representative of really one of the height of these 2 Gray Hills tapestries. Well, these 2 rugs are out of context with our Decades exhibit. We just put them together. These are our 2 premier weavers. This is Daisy Togglechi. This is one of the biggest, finest rugs she ever wove. Daisy was the grande dame of 2 Gray Hills weavers. Daisy won Gallup Ceremonials, which was our main juried event for Navajo rugs. She won Gallup 25 years in a row. She was really unprecedented. And this rug comes from sometime in the late 50s. We don't have real good documentation on this rug because of how it was sold and traded around. But it runs about 120 to 130 wefts per inch. And we see a picture of Daisy up here. And Daisy was born in 1911. She fell down the stairs at her daughter and her granddaughter's house in 1985, broke her hip, and that ended her weaving career. She passed away in 1990. This rug here is by Bessie Minigoats, and it's just spectacular, beautiful, beautiful, crisp, such clear designs. I love showing these to our contemporary weavers because she was able to draw her angular lines so straight, and she spun her wool so fine. The other weavers are always just amazed to see these early rugs by these weavers. So these are our 2 grand dames, what we call our legendary master weavers. So we have a special chapter in our book just on these 2 weavers. Here we have a continuation of the decade of the 80s. This is a spectacular rug woven by Lynette Nez, and she was one of our really pristine master weavers. She never obtained the fame of Daisy Togglechi, but was almost comparable in her work, and this is a very fine piece by her. And next to it is a rug by one of her cousin sisters, Mary Ann Damon. And Mary Ann is still with us and still weaves occasionally. But Lynette's gone, but Mary Ann is still with us and still weaves. And these both weavers out of the Bear Clan, and the Bear Clan is one of our really big families. They all come from an earlier weaver we talked about, Mrs. Police Boy, and they're granddaughters of Mrs. Police Boy. Here we have a rug by a young weaver, Theda Hunt. She finished this rug when she was 22 years old. So she very, very accomplished. And after she made this rug, she decided she wanted to get an education and go away to college, which she did, and then she went ahead and got a job, and she decided she really didn't like it, and so now she lives back on the reservation weaving again. But she finished this rug in about sometime in the late 1990s. So we're going into a section now of things being done from the 1990s. This we looked at a rug earlier by Esther Silent Man with this distinctive design. This is Julia Jumbo, and Julia was probably the premier Navajo weaver for the last quarter of the 20th century. And we commissioned this rug. She had mostly made smaller tapestries by this point, didn't do large things. It took me about 2 years to talk her into making this. It took her 18 months to weave it, and we see a succession of photographs of the rug being made while it was on the loom. So 18 months on the loom. It's so fine, it's about 100 wefts, and it contains about 6 miles of hand-spun yarn to complete the rug. So we see the photos are really great to kind of document, her making of it. Next to Julia's rug is a rug by Angeline Silent Man. And Angie is the daughter of Claire Sherman, and Claire was another one of our big name weavers. And unfortunately, Angie had some real hand problems and had surgery, and the surgery ruined her hand. And so this is the last rug she wove. She finished this one in 1999. Great talent, but unfortunately has not made any rugs since. But she has, she's used about 8 or 9 different colors in the rug, and if you look in this area right here, there's 5 colors just in that one section. So you see beautiful, lacy, beautiful designs. It's really a shame she can't keep her weaving up. She's very sad about it. So here we have a rug by Angie's mother, Clara Sherman, and Clara was really one of our real sweethearts. She made me her last rug when she was 94. She passed away when she was 96. And Clara gave me a million trading stories. She was always so much fun to deal with. You never knew. She was just a ball of energy, and she made a beautiful rug. And this was the finest thing she ever did. This was a special order by us, and it took all the top awards at Gallup Ceremonials in the year 2000. And when Claire brought it in, I was so impressed she did such a good job. And I said, boy, you're going to really show these young guys, young weavers around here, where it's at. And she looks at me, she goes, that's right. So she was a lot of fun. And so the rug next to it is the cover of our catalog, and it is by Virginia Deal. And this was, again, 18 months on the loom. It contains about 8 miles of hand-spun yarn. And so we took photographs of this rug as it was being done too. And it has 9 colors, 9 natural shades of wool. The black has been over-dyed, but the rest of the colors are all natural wool colors. And Virginia thinks a lot of the other weavers put their designs too close together, too fussy, and so she liked really using space and showing off the really beautiful shades of wool that she used in her rug. And Virginia was really our sweetheart. She's still with us. She's no longer weaving. She's 88 this year. So she has given up the loom. She retired her loom and let us put it in our museum with one of her rugs on it. And now we get into some of the 21st century things that are being made today for us. This is Mary H. Yazzie. She's the premier round rug weaver, and she virtually can do any design of rug. This image here is a sand painting image of the Mother Earth, Father Sky. And you see Mother Earth with the sacred plants in her body, and you see Father Sky with the sun and the moon and all the constellations. And she's one of our most popular, weavers today as far as selling. And she does some small rugs, round rugs, up to very big round rugs. And Mary travels with us quite a bit and demonstrates. She speaks no English, and yet we take her all over the country. Her daughter cards and spins wool for, and she weaves, and her daughter speaks English, so she doesn't mind at all visiting with people, but she has to do it through her daughter unless you speak Navajo. This is our other most popular weaver here. This is Esther Et City, and she's very humorous with her figures there. And Totalina's up against the mountain. There's a canyon right there. Esther lives about 10 miles north of the trading post, similarly right against the mountain, and there's a canyon. And on the canyon walls are all the petroglyph designs, and so that's where Esther took her designs. And she first brought me a 2 Gray Hills rug with a couple of Kokopellis in it. I loved it, and the rest is history. And now she mostly uses all the different rock art designs in her rugs that she sees on the petroglyphs. very productive weaver, and fortunately so's Marin, because we find their rugs pretty easy to sell. Okay, next we have a rug, a contemporary rug. This was finished a few years ago. It's a very, very fine tapestry done as a runner, and we try not to encourage what the weavers do, because we want them to do what they want to do and real creative, but we have encouraged this shape because it broadens our market a little and people find these real displayable. So the runners have been real popular for us. Mostly they're not tapestries like this one is, and she's used, it's just a beautiful use of the gold and tan wools and browns all through this. Very, very fine. And this is Sally Nelson, by the way. Her maiden name was Benally. Her mother's Emma Benally, one of our master weavers. And so Sally is our second generation master weaver. Sally has an older sister, Donna, too, that's another one of our master weavers. This is Marianne Foster. And Marianne is also 88 this year. She finished this rug for us in about 10, 11 years ago. And it's also an image of Mother Earth, Father Sky. And this is the last living weaver from the Hostine claw sand painting weaving tradition. And Marianne's pretty much done weaving, so with her passes that whole great tradition. It's all hand spun natural wool. She uses no dyes in her rug. It runs about 70 wefts per inch. It's very, very fine. You can see she has her bat, her winged messenger to protect, and then she has a tobacco pouch up here that are guardians for the holy people that are seen in the image here. Here we have two really fine tapestries. The top one is by Selena Dale, and Selena is our leading colorist. She picks the most exquisite shades of wool. She cards and combs various darker and lighter shades to get all the subtones she gets. Very creative. She has almost this Celtic knot look about her weaving, and she and her niece, Edith Yazzie, down below here, are our two finest still living tapestry weavers today. And you see they both are very much colorist and pick really beautiful shades of tans and golds and grays, and really do a wonderful job with their rugs. And so we're real pleased that they still will continue their weaving. So this rug really represents our future there at Total Lean Trading Post, where we support all of our weavers. This is Stacy Watchman. Stacy is our youngest master weaver. She's 25 years old now, and she really reached that master weaver status before she was 20 years old. Beautifully fine rugs, really wonderful. Her grandmother is Evelyn George, and Evelyn has all this beautiful gold wool, and so Stacy gets her share of it because she's the granddaughter, so you see, a lot of use of this really rare golden wool in here. And Stacy's mom is also one of our master weavers, Emily Watchman, and as is the grandmother, Evelyn George. And so we see beautifully fine stuff, and we're really encouraged when we see a young weaver like this doing such beautiful work, because really that's our future.